Okay, I think we have everyone now. Hello and welcome. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about who we are. Globig is located around the world. We have a team of experts that have taken hundreds of companies into international markets and have supported over 15,000 business leaders in their journeys. Together, we turn complexity into clarity and ideas into real momentum. Our goal is to provide clients with the strategy, creativity, insider knowledge, tech, and AI tools to drive velocity, growth, and knowledge they need in each market to reduce risks and increase their success rate. Here's how that works. So we have a simple formula that we use. We take human expertise, creativity, technical acumen, then we add AI power, and from that we get smarter, faster, more affordable growth. So that's Globig in a nutshell. Now I'm going to introduce you to our CEO and founder, Anka Corbin. She's a leading expert in rapid global growth for Fortune 500 companies, mostly software and services, startups, and scale-ups. So she has a ton of expertise in helping businesses grow and grow fast. Anka, would you like to say a couple words?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you are here, and I look forward to seeing how we can support you and teach you and kind of surround you with the things that you need so this journey isn't so lonely and so scary. That's really what we're here for. We've been doing this for a really long time, and it's been one of my biggest pleasures to be a mentor for companies and individuals that are just trying to figure this out, sharing some of the insights that we've learned over the years, and that's what we're here for. So we look forward to having more and more of these conversations. But anyway, I'm going to let it go back to Sharon. So thank you for being here, and we are really excited to get to know you more.
Thank you, Anka. So, as you may have seen on the invitation, my name is Sharon Christine Cozart, and I have a deep background in brand marketing for global companies such as PepsiCo. It was the place where we were able to do a lot of brand innovations, which was fantastic. And we did many iterations of brand redesign and localization across the globe. So, we also worked on Microsoft, which was not just here in the US, but also in the Americas. So many other companies as well that I won't bore you with at this point. But anyway, that is my specialty, and I'm going to take you through how to brand localize across the globe and the things that you really need to consider as we go forward. The title of this webinar is Lost in Translation, Brand Localization That Wins in New Markets. So thanks again for joining. We'll get to know you a little bit more as we go along. We've talked about who we are. I've talked a little bit about our approach. I've captured this here for you if you want to go back and look at it. We'll be sharing this as well. We'll have a recording. So, if you lead marketing, product, or go to market for a company expanding internationally, you are operating in one of the most demanding environments in business. Your customers may be risk aware, influenced by internal stakeholders, guided by cultural expectations, regulations, and social norms. And yet, most global expansion strategies still rely on the same flawed assumption. If it worked in our home market, it'll work everywhere. That assumption kills growth because trust, whether you sell to enterprises or everyday customers, it's not built by translation. I think most people know that. But to really understand, you can't just translate it. What it's really built by is cultural credibility. So today you're going to learn the frameworks for adapting your message without weakening your brand, when to use AI dramatically to reduce localization costs, and to design customer experiences that feel locally relevant, not globally generic. So this is the difference between a global brand that looks impressive and one that actually converts. Any questions so far? If you have some, let's go ahead and put them in the comments. So let's go through part one. Why brand localization is harder than it looks. When you enter a new market, you're not just selling a product, you're selling reliability, understanding, long-term value, and a sense of safety for the buyer. That's really important. Your messaging has to survive cultural expectations, legal and regulatory realities, social norms, which are different than cultural expectations. We'll talk a little bit about that. And local definitions of credibility. What matters most to people? Most localization failures come from four predictable mistakes: literal translation instead of cultural meaning, stereotype-based personas instead of actual people, incorrect tone for how trust is built locally, ignoring regulations that change what is even allowed to be said, and none of these show up in spreadsheets. They show up in lost trust. You'll put your message out there and wonder why no one is responding. So this means that localization mistakes, they're not cosmetic. They're not something that show up as a part of your brand messaging. They have commercial consequences. One wrong tone can signal this brand doesn't understand us. This purchase feels risky. This wasn't built for our market. That's why literal translation, globalized messaging, and one size fits all positioning, those things quietly destroy conversion rates in both B2B and product-led businesses. So we're going to move on to part two. The strategic choice every global brand must make. So this is really important. From the Globig playbook that we have, every expansion requires one clear decision. Are we pursuing cultural integration or selective adaptation? This determines how much your brand changes, how fast you can scale, how deeply you need local trust. Remember that cultural integration works best when you are entering a strong or highly distinctive cultures, one that's very different from your own. You can also use it when you're selling high consideration products or long-term services. And it also, local credibility really matters more than global recognition. So think about this. If you're in Japan, Germany, China, or the Middle East, healthcare, finance, or regulated industries, that's probably when you want to use cultural integration. And that's when you actually make your product look, feel, sound exactly like it belongs to that culture. Now, selective adaptation, on the other hand, it works best when you're a product-led SaaS platform or digital brand. You need to scale across multiple regions quickly. You sell on clarity, value, and performance. And those things you can pick and choose exactly where you want to show that you're a global organization and where you want to integrate into the culture and use their language or even in user experiences. How do you adopt those? But even here, tone, proof points, buying triggers, those all must be localized. Half localized brands don't look efficient. They look like they're out of touch. One mistake teams make is thinking localization means becoming a different brand in every country. That's definitely not how it goes. You want to keep your core identity, your values, promise, personality, and positioning. All of those things should stay consistent. What changes is how the identity is expressed. I'm going to say that again. What changes is how the identity is expressed.
Give an example of that. Like, let's talk a little bit about, how did Coke maybe or anyone, how did they say it differently, right? Like they
Absolutely.
might.
I had the privilege of being in Beijing and visiting the PepsiCo offices there, and how they integrated into the culture was very selective. They knew that the draw was that it was a global brand, that they were part of something that was outside of Chinese culture, that it had a global cachet. They knew that if they went anywhere in the world, you could find Pepsi. And that brand was so popular. But the things that changed were the messaging within the country. Obviously, they had very strict standards on what could be said and not said, shown and not shown in commercials. It definitely adopted the values of sharing and making sure that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, which is definitely big in Chinese culture. Whereas other places, it may be like, Pepsi, this is your thing. This is the thing that you do. And it's very individualized. So they did a cultural shift in the messaging. Their brand localization also went down to operations, like how they got it distributed, how it was displayed in stores, things like that, that they really were able to localize those the way the brand showed up in those places. Does that answer your question? Does that give you a good example? Okay. So again, that gives you a great example of how identity is expressed. Think of it like an accent. So it's not a personality transplant. If you are French and you show up somewhere else, you carry your Frenchness with you and you may have your French accent. So it's not that you change who you are, it changes the way you express things. So the brands that win globally have one core story, many culturally fluent versions of that story. So that's very important to know whether you want to do cultural integration or selective adaptation. And that will really depend on your company alone. Now let's talk a little bit about what makes all the difference in making sure that your brand is well localized. So here's something I want you to remember. People don't reject what you say. They reject what your message implies about risk. Will they find value for the money that they paid? So if most teams localize headlines, product descriptions, feature lists, that's kind of your baseline. But what actually determines conversion is, does this brand feel safe, relevant, and built for people like me? Now, if we know in some cultures, authority builds trust. In others, community does. In others, compliance, transparency, or emotional tone matters most. So when you take, for example, a US brand voice, optimized for speed, disruption, bold claims, and drop it into Germany, Japan, or Latin America, it may sound to them reckless, immature, or simply untrustworthy. That's the cultural misalignment gap. So we know that things like AI can translate words, but only strategy can translate risk tolerance. Remember that culture also shapes whether authority should sound formal or friendly, whether buyers expect emotional warmth or factual precision, whether humor builds trust or destroys it. In some markets, a playful brand feels approachable. In others, it feels unserious. And how buying decisions actually get made by individuals, committees, or institutions. All of these things are what you'll have to take into consideration when you are talking about the cultural misalignment gap. You need to make sure that you fill that gap so that your brand feels safe, relevant, and built for your audience. So let's go ahead and talk about the Globig's brand localization system. We use what is called the double diamond framework, borrowed from others, obviously. You've probably seen this before. There are four stages to this, and it's very important to go through each and every one of them because you can't just gloss through this and expect your brand to be successful. Let's go through each of these. Use this double diamond framework, but then what we do is take our senior level expertise and we add in our AI enabled tools, and those are what makes the secret sauce work. Let's talk about Discover. We'll go into this in a little bit of detail just because this is very important and shows you how we actually do this. In the Discover mode, you'll take this step by step. And first of all, you really have to learn how decisions get made. It's just like trying to figure out who the decision maker is when you are selling to somebody. If you're talking to people who aren't making the decisions, it's really not going to matter much. So you have to figure out how that happens. Does it happen by consensus? Does it happen individually or by certain people? And then also delve into what people fear. What do they value? How competitors position themselves. You can really learn a lot from your competitors and how they are operating. You can figure out what is going to work for you and then how you can differentiate yourself from what others are doing in the market, but still making sure that you are discovering what makes people tick and who makes the decisions. So this is where AI is your research assistant. So you can use AI to find local product reviews, competitor messaging, social conversations, and to find out industry language. All of this shows you what customers care about, the language they use, and what they trust. It's important to understand that AI is not a replacement for actual cultural research. It's a force multiplier for it. AI is really good at finding patterns, summarizing large volumes of data, surfacing language, sentiment, themes, which is really important for localizing your brand. But remember that it's really limited in its ability to show which patterns are strategically important, culturally risky, or commercially meaningful. It can definitely lead you in the direction, but you really require human judgment. You have to look at the data and look at what is right for your team. So when teams use AI without cultural strategy, they get fast translation. You get shallow localization. When teams combine AI with the right research frameworks like this one and market insight, you get speed, scale, and cultural intelligence. That's when AI plus insights and strategy work together. Use the right tool at the right time for the best and most accurate results. It's really important as you're going into a new market and trying to localize your brand. You want to make sure that you reduce the risk to you and that you don't make any big mistakes. Second factor is to define. Now you decide what stays global, what must change, and where your brand risks sound foreign. So this is where websites, messaging, value propositions, campaigns, this is where you can stress test them against the culture. Everything that you found out in the discovery stage, you're going to build all of your value propositions and messaging, everything, all your visuals, etc., and you're going to define them against what you've already created. So you localize story, tone, visuals, and proof points. AI can speed up the processes once you've clearly defined what works. So this is where you can create briefs that are based on that cultural insight. And from there, you can create the stories, create the visuals, create the proof points, and use that to amplify your message and speed up your processes. Then you test with real audiences. So here, AI becomes your drafting partner. You can use it to generalize localized value propositions, test tone and phrasing, adapt headlines and calls to action. But it comes down to human discernment and disciplined strategy. That decides what gets changed and what stays sacred for your brand. So lastly, we'll talk about the deliver stage. You measure engagement, conversion, retention, and trust signals, and you refine those continuously. Those are the things that you can feed back into your discovery stage because you will always need to go back and make sure throughout the process that you're able to rejigger everything that you've done just in case things have shifted within the culture, which can happen. Culture never stays the same. Culture wants to change. So you need to make sure that your brand changes as well. So let's talk about the data that makes brand localization work. High-performing localization blends 4 different types of data. Make sure that you take all of these into consideration, not just one or the other. You want to make sure you have a full picture of what is going to give you the right signals so you know what decisions to make and to make the right decisions. Qualitative data, those are interviews, reviews, social listening. Quantitative data, traffic, conversion, sales, retention, the things you count. And generative, discovering new needs. So that can be aided by AI, by things like focus groups or talking to individuals one-on-one. That's where you can figure out where your brand can do better and how you can make your message stick more firmly within their culture. Evaluative data is also testing what actually works. So you want to use all 4 types of these as you're moving forward. The most dangerous mistake is believing that your global story works everywhere. The best teams prove it market by market. It definitely takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of research, but it's worth your time. So let's wrap up. Global expansion doesn't fail because teams don't care. It fails because they don't have a system for turning cultural insight into growth. Today, you saw how localization affects trust, not just translation, how cultural risk shapes buying behavior, why AI and research can work together to increase efficiency and accuracy. Just remember that these frameworks only create impact when teams can apply them. So you have to apply them across regions, across marketing product, and your go-to-market strategies. Also across real launches with real customers. At Globig, this is exactly what we do. We help growing brands move from global ambition to local credibility. However you continue this work, remember, don't guess your way into new markets. Design your way in. Think strategically. As we wrap up, keep a few principles top of mind to ensure ongoing brand success and growth. First, stay curious. Markets evolve, and so do customer expectations. Culture evolves. Make a habit to revisit your initial questions, gather new insights, and adapt your approach as you learn more about each local landscape. Curiosity is what's going to keep your strategy fresh and responsive. Next, balance consistency and flexibility. Your core brand identity is your anchor, but don't be afraid to adapt it to local cultures and preferences. The most successful brands find that sweet spot, remaining true to their values while embracing what makes each market unique. Then celebrate local wins. Every successful localization effort is worth celebrating. Share these stories internally to inspire your team, build momentum, and fuel enthusiasm for future products. It's really important to recognize those local achievements because they both boost morale and also reinforce the value of a thoughtful brand localization strategy. So that's really it. Thank you so much. Now we have time to take your questions.